Let's just jump right into it. Our question today is which marketing attribution model should I use? And I have some personal thoughts on marketing attribution, but you're the expert, so I definitely want to hear from you. Let's start with the basics. Can you explain what is marketing attribution and really why we should care about it?
Yeah, I love that. Start with the basics. Essentially, it's just figuring out where your traffic is coming from, right? Or essentially, like which marketing efforts are impacting your overall goals the most in a very like kind of high level definition. If you look at it from a reporting standpoint, it's kind of they'll usually, when I say they, I mean like a reporting system like Google Analytics or HubSpot or something like that, break it down by channels. It's essentially identifying which channels are having the greatest impact or impacting your overall marketing objectives.
So, the primary goal then of marketing attribution is to see like where things are being impacted. So, are you typically looking at revenue? Are you looking at leads? Like from your experience, where do you see most people wanting to measure their marketing and like place that marketing attribution?
Sure. So, I mean, it really depends on what your marketing objectives are, right? If you're an e-commerce company and your goal is sales, like product sales, then obviously you're going to be like, all right, where are my sales coming from? Are they coming from my social media ads? Are they coming from my search ads? Are they coming from my organic placements? And you really want to know where to give credit to your sales and to your overall to your conversion points because you want to know which efforts are working and where you want to spend more of your time because obviously like we know as marketers and digital marketers there's an endless list of things that we could focus on and dedicate our time to, and attribution really helps identify what's been working and where to really put that time and effort to.
Yeah, there's an analogy I like that's like we you want to know what channels are contributing to your success so then when you need to you can like put the gas on,
Exactly.
like pull those levers so obviously that takes a lot of like testing and figuring out. And I mean, from my personal experience, attribution can be tough. Like it's hard to get correct attribution. And I think it's all a matter of how you look at it. So when we talk about looking at attribution, there's obviously different models. What are some common like types of marketing attribution models that you use and maybe ones that you prefer over others?
Sure. So just a quick rebuttal, like on what you just said.
Yeah.
Attribution is incredibly challenging in today's world
Mm-hmm.
for a number of factors, but mostly because people are so well researched in whatever they're doing because the internet and Google have provided this wealth of information that there are so many different touch points in a buyer or customer journey nowadays that it's really hard. I shouldn't say it's really hard, like it's not impossible, but it is a challenge to really hone in on all those different touch points. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that said,
Before we jump into this next point, I feel like for those listening, I think it is important to know that you may never see like 100% accuracy in your attribution. You kind of always has to take it with a grain of salt because even if from a digital perspective we have perfect attribution, a user could see your billboard and then click on a paid ad. And from a digital perspective, we're probably only seeing that paid ad attribution where you probably should give credit to that billboard as well. But like you said, there's so many touch points in a buyer's journey that it's really hard to get that accuracy. So, with that, let's talk about the different types of attribution models you use and maybe if you prefer ones over others.
sure. So obviously, like you said, like I'm the paid media director at Evenbound, so a big focus of mine is paid advertising, right? Or paid media from paid social or Google search and things like that. So, because that's where a lot of I say that because that's where a lot of my point of view is going to come from. But the first two common ones models are going to be like your first and last touch attribution models. Those are just like what they sound. If you have it set to first touch, then that's going to be based off of like that first click, right? So, for example, if a user is searching, for a keyword that you're targeting in a Google search campaign, and they click on that Google search ad first, and then they go to your website, look at the product. It doesn't matter what else they do in this buyer's journey. That first click is going to get the credit, all the credit, 100% of that credit for the purchase or whatever they end up doing. And then the opposite of that, last click, is just that no matter what happened in that buyer's journey, the only attribution that matters is what they did last before they did that action. In this case, it would be a purchase. So, let's say that they came through a Google search ad, then they came back through a social media ad, and then at the end of that, they came back through an organic placement and ultimately did their purchase. That last organic placement is the only thing that matters in this attribution model. So now there's a lot of other kind of multi-touch attribution models. One pretty common one is time decay. I actually like this one. It's kind of fun. So this it's and again they're very self-explanatory. Things decay over time, right? So let's say like you have your first one, social media. Someone clicks on a social media ad, then they come back and click on a paid search ad, and then they come back and click on an organic. So that's three. The last one that they click on is organic. So that's going to get the most credit, right? So let's say that would get 50% of the credit. And then that second click is going to get 30%, and that first click is going to get like 20% or something like that. So I think that math adds up, something like that,
Yeah.
but
So we're
it makes sense.
we're breaking down this attribution into decimals now, like a half a
Yep.
point, a quarter of a point, things like that.
Yeah, I like to look at it as a percentage. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
just easier, but it's really like if you're going to look at it from a whole number of one, then yeah, it'll break it down by like 0.25
Yeah.
or it's nice when it's in like somewhat of an easy number to understand.
Yep.
But sometimes there are so many touch points in, a user or buyer journey. Like I don't know about you, but I probably look at a product maybe 3 or 4 times before I purchase it.
Sure.
Maybe even more than that, if it's a cool pair of shoes or something, like I don't know. So especially like travel too, like travel, there's so much research that goes into that. There's so many different touch points. So
Mm-hmm.
another cool attribution model is going to be like a U-shaped. It's U-shaped attribution, and no matter what, it's the first and last click that get the most credit. So, if it's going to be like a paid ad, that's first, and then there's a bunch of like social media in the middle, and then maybe that last click is going to be like an organic ranking or something like that. It's going to be that first click on the paid ad, and then the organic ranking that gets the most credit in that U-shaped attribution model. Um, then after that, this is kind of the big one is data driven. Data driven is it involves machine learning. So this is kind of like, and for example, Google, they kind of keep it behind the curtain a little bit. All we know is that there's machine learning and then there's a bunch of different factors that kind of fall into play. So, a lot of those things are probably like your typical user experience, like, time on page, like like which session did they spend the most time on the site? How quickly were they to, act? Which channel do they travel through the most? All those kind of factors is like kind of data driven. So data driven is important because those are the default nowadays for Google Ads and GA4. We all know the big GA4 migration is coming up in a couple weeks here,
Oh
so
yeah.
it's important to note that.
Mm-hmm.
And like if you don't go through and change anything, that's how your attribution models are going to be set if you're using those two big platforms. So.
Gotcha.
And like I said, like it's a little bit behind the Iron Curtain over there,
Yeah.
in Google and other places too. So we don't know all the factors, but we kind of know how it works. And I've been using data driven attribution now for a couple of years, and it's worked itself out. Like that is probably one of the go-to ones. That and from a paid ad standpoint, I also really like to use like first click attribution too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that kind of leads me into my next question. So, I'm sure because there are so many different types of attribution models, it's not a one size fits all for a business. And it probably depends, like you said, about on like your marketing objectives and your goals. So, if you're a business, how do you recommend people think about finding the right attribution model for themselves? Like, what should they consider in that process?
Yeah. The very first step for that is you got to figure out your customer journey and really have a good understanding of like that in your target audience. Like understand like what they're like, and of course, every online experience, every user is unique. But like, if you know your target audience and your customer journey, how often they're and what channels they're going to be using, how many touch points are probably going to happen in that, that purchase or conversion journey. So you really have to understand just what interactions to expect from that. And then also use the tools. I mean, there are plenty of attribution tools that you can test, that you can literally compare the different attribution models nowadays. And you can even follow like like a customer journey or a user journey throughout a conversion point in GA4 and HubSpot too. So study the data before you really rely on one. But honestly, like I am constantly checking different attribution models. Like I said, I usually look at first click a lot because it's from an ad perspective, and we do a lot of advertising on Google search. So Google search is typically people's first stop in any customer journey because if the intent is so high, people are actively researching. And then also I like to look at last click a lot too because I want to know where people went when we finally got them over the hump, whatever the conversion goal was, what channel did they use, which a lot of times that falls into direct, unfortunately, which is like Google's thing for like, oh, they might have typed in your URL or we just couldn't figure it out. But
Yeah.
usually it's like something like that. But then again, like the data driven one too, because Google's algorithm or AI will figure that out and gives credit where credit is due. So
Yeah.
I like those ones as well. But just use the tools. There's different model comparison tools. I think
Mhm.
those are the best place to look to.
Yeah, I like that. So shop around a little bit, get comfortable with some different models and see which one works best for you.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely. It's even helpful to like if you're actively reporting, report on different attribution models.
mhm.
Like hey, like our social ads impacted our last click attribution greatly, but they weren't where people were clicking first, and that's important just to understand the user journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Spencer, this was super helpful. Before we wrap up, are you open to people reaching out on LinkedIn if they have questions or just want to connect with you on that level?
Yeah, 110%. Hit me up on
Cool.
LinkedIn on the inbox. I will always look. If you're trying to sell something, it might be a little bit of a delayed response, but if you have an honest question, I'm here for it.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. And I'll link your LinkedIn in our description or bio. So cool. Well, thank you so much again. Super great to have you back on. Hopefully, we can have you on for future episodes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And thank you all for spending a few minutes with us today. Please feel free to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.